Hi, I'm back again with another video. So, let's see. Let me go ahead and set up the sharing. We're all about the sharing here, aren't we? Right. So, this is part two to the previous video that I did about the alt-right Hotep, short-lived, whatever you want to call it. So funny enough, when I was going to pull up the articles to link to this and just rereading and refamiliarizing myself with the content, there's this new disclaimer on the main article. So I'm then debating how to approach this. I think it'll be for the sake of what I want to do here, to just read the original Hotep Nation article. What is this alt-right Hotep alliance? As you can see here, let me just double check, make sure that's what you're seeing. Yep, we're in the same screen. Okay. So I can just start there. And because this is where actually I originally found out about this. This is Occidental Dissent. Still, I think a great site. Hunter Wallace and company run this. They're kind of more from the Southern Nationalist tradition, kind of like, I guess now, especially if you're seeing this in the date that I'm making this video, and you're kind of in the alt-right or in the periphery of that, the dissident right, that whole scene, there's been a whole heap of, I'm debating maybe doing a live stream about it, seeing if anyone shows up, because there's a lot to talk about, and there's some things I even want to kind of factor in. Anyway, so you do Hunter Wallace this weekend. He just did an interview with Christopher Cantwell. Well, no, he did the original one. No, that was just a few days ago. They did an interview together. The whole Ricky Vaughn doxing, all that jazz. So anyway, if you're remotely familiar with those happenings of the past few days, then you're probably familiar with the name Hunter Wallace. So this is Occidental Dissent. And this article ran here on February 27th of 2017. That's about a year ago. So the article is just kind of cross-referencing back to what was discussed here on Hotep Nation. So I think just for the sake of what I'm trying to do here, we'll start here in the Hotep Nation article, and then I can just kind of use the points that Hunter Wallace tries to suggest are palpable. That's not the word. Struggling the word I want to use there. But anyway, what he thinks can be some type of bridge or some continuity. And I'm going to have to come back. There's an article on this website that is just, it's a short story and it's just bad. And you're watching, you can watch the feed come up, and you can see some of the side articles here. I have a lot to say, and actually, because I mentioned you before in the previous video, I don't want to get ahead of myself. The third article that I'll just kind of, I don't even know if I'll even use that much of it, because upon reading this again for the first time, when did this go live? 3 months ago. There's not really much here, but I just kind of want to just have this one up here as a reference point, and I linked it below for you to see. Especially because I guess slowly what I'm starting to discover is mostly, Black women who kind of maybe are tangentially coming off of the kind of Black woman centric BWE, Brick Cow, Black woman sovereign, kind of, huddled around some of the major kind of people that kind of represent those voices, and you're kind of finding your way over here. I think this video and the one I made previous to this are kind of important for you to maybe just take a look at, because we keep talking about all the stuff that's going on with Black men and Black women, and us figuring out, what we're going to do, where to go from here. And I think the key thing that I guess for you as a Black woman watching this, I want to communicate, because I've been honest, and I'll continue to let you know this up front. I am actually more of a dissident right, alt-right in the term. See, now, especially this past weekend, it gets even more tricky with this term to say. So I guess it's funny because, like, there's a video I should link to this. There's Scotch Oikos. He did a video of the libertarian to alt-right pipeline. And funnily enough, like a lot of people from that scene, I was a big Ron Paul person and supportive of that kind of libertarian thought. And then I kind of find myself, going through that pipeline to a certain extent into this scene. So I guess what I want to communicate is, one, that is kind of the maybe mostly political history political scene that I'm coming from, and that's kind of where my politics lie in terms of being a race realist, being more right leaning, being very anti-egalitarian against this kind of the left right neoconservative neoliberal paradigm that we live in today. So I'm coming from this school and this tradition, even though I have a lot of problems with it, especially after this past weekend, even more so. But that's a whole nother story for another time. But just so I put that out there out front, I'm not, and especially when I talk about these Hoteps like Uncle Mayhem and Hotep Jesus, and even the other guy that was in the previous video on that talk with some of the identity Europa types. I'm not just some random black male who's like basically a base dindu in a Trump hat. I don't know if you're probably not familiar with that meme. I was thinking I have to maybe just show that Murdoch video. Basically, there's been this kind of like rise of black men showing up in Trump hats. Whining about, how they're really conservatives too, and these Democrats are just so evil, and everything's about feminism and black fathers in the home. You'll see that in this article, but it's like, so what I'm trying to communicate more to you black women, you need to understand that I see way too many of you who are still stuck in this left-right paradigm. You're very Democrat. You've already voted for the Black Lives Matter as the feds. Yeah, no way. let's just can we turn it off? Yeah, let's just turn that scroll off. Anyway, so this was written by Hotep Jesus. So if you watch part 1 of the video, he's the dude with the dreads. And since Hunter put the clip of the one of his interviews, that's him right there. He's in the previous video. And I guess what I could do is open up the one. No, well, it's just basically the same boilerplate that's going to come up in the article. But that's that's Hotep Jesus, and he was in the previous video, and he also does an interview with Red Ice Radio. Let's jump into this because what I think I kind of that's the other one, because there's a spoiler alert that I didn't realize until tonight, and I went to go look this up. So let's quickly move through, because I've already now, hopefully in this first 20 videos, established a lot. And then if you are from other sectors, other channels here, you know exactly where I'm getting at with this whole black man, black woman, goofiness, real fathers in the home. I'm thinking about maybe changing the name of the channel to like the 3 W's: welfare, wick, and weed. I think that kind of encapsulates a lot of this discussion. And even when you think spoiler alert, move, I don't want to spoil it for you, because we gotta move quickly, because I think that deserves me to spend some time on it alone. So anyway, I've kind of done my typical meandering, but so like I had this comment on other videos. Someone was like, I could make some tea and really just sit here and listen to your videos. I'm like, yeah, girl, I am going to be striving for more brevity, some more short videos, and just really holding myself to like 10 minutes. Shout out to Virgo Sun. I've seen her comment forever on like a lot of the black women channels that kind of float around, and she's got an amazing channel. And I've been watching a lot of her videos, and she does a really great job of just making these great 5-10 minute, if that, videos that hone in on things, maybe going towards more 15-20. I just don't do as many, and there's so many subjects now that I'm just like, I just want to pour into. But I am consciously working, so then that way you can digest a little bit more and not feel like you have to commit. Because I think about it myself when I'm watching other people's videos, like, oh man, that's great, but it's like 20 minutes and I'm in the car and I have just about maybe 8 minutes to drive to work or go to the store. So anyway, that's something I'm definitely striving towards. So let's just dive right in. On the past few months on Twitter, people have noticed a few Hoteps and I have become quite friendly with white nationalists / alt-right. People don't understand it, so allow me to take this time to explain. First, both sides represent the alpha traits of their respective races. Hoteps represent that for blacks and alt-right for whites. The left is quite feminine in their approach, whereas they like to cry, complain, and protest, but never actually want to do anything for themselves. Hotep and alt-right want to do for self. They want independence. So let's just pause there. When again, like I said, I initially almost started this channel based on this whole scene. Because when this came up, just like the very first 2 videos I did on this channel was like the whole teaching these black men how to tie ties. And I was just like, God damn it. And I got out of bed. I like got on my like camera phone and just sat there and like, did my first 2 videos on this channel. But this is originally what I'd wanted to talk about. But I just kind of meandered and I was like, I don't know what I did. I just didn't do it. This is a year ago. And I think I didn't run into these articles until maybe 3 or 4 months later from when they originally came out. So I'm trying to recall. That really struck me. So this whole alpha beta thing, everyone now has seen it, is permeated so many discussions that I don't even and especially when it comes to black men, particularly using this term, they don't really understand that. So I'm gonna just marry 2 points here. As you know, Kendall, Crystalline, Izzy, Simone, all the discussions we've had of refocusing the black race, particularly black Americans, in this grander scheme of the past 50 years, outwards to the past 100 years, and even before coming to the Americans, before the diaspora, outwards. And you go back to the black man selling his own people to the Arabs, then selling his people to the whites and the Spaniards who showed up on the shores. This whole alpha trait thing, representing alpha traits, the black male is basically the beta bitch to every other male on this planet. So when we even just want to unpack that from here on this point, that's a failure onto itself. But I'm gonna try to take their viewpoint. These are black men who's like, oh well, we just want to be in the fathers. We want to be fathers in the home. We want all this stuff. And we want to lead and be men. But as most of us black women in these circles talk about, they aren't leading anything. They don't want to lead. They had no problem letting the white man's welfare, WIC and welfare feed their children, or too many of their children, for the past 50 years. So representing these alpha traits, like, I just don't. And even it's just that the way they keep misusing the terms, and they don't want to accept the responsibility that comes with it. They're just picking these very basic, well, the hover hand that some men talk about, in some scenes, that's a beta thing to do. You're supposed to class a woman by her shoulder when you're taking a picture hugging with her. Those are very like basic traits. I kind of lost that tangent there. Basically, the alpha traits of their respective races. I guess that's what these Hoteps are thinking that they're doing. But as Kendall even points out, and I always really like that she mentions this, and she mentions it regularly, that she used to be part of these Afrocentric Hoteps, red, black, and green type of black people, uplifting economic empowerment, not eating pork, eating better. This has been going on forever. And funny, Kendall is about the same age as my older cousin, who, and I remember this, I was young in the 90s, and my cousin used to have hair relaxers. She was just typical, like, black American girl in America. And then she got into all this, like, pro blackity black stuff, like this Hoteps, which is basically just a repackaged version of this whole, that's the thing that killed me reading this. I was like, this is the same shit that they've been recirculating around the black race for like years. Remember that family, go back to Africa types. They had this house. His name was John Africa. It was like maybe in Philly or Baltimore or something back in the 70s. And they got firebombed out of this house. They were squatting, all these black men, children. I mean, you've had all these black identity-ish movements for forever. It's funny that the minute they get from under the white man's boot, they want to have all these Pan-African, back to Africa things and all this empowerment. And but it's only really ever like 5 or 10%, maybe 5% of the population. Most black people get to put one pants leg on at a time and keep it moving. But anyway, I'm really, really, really consciously trying to avoid all the tangents. I really want to come back to the recap that's after this. So let me just keep moving slowly. I think I have to just stop because I reiterated. If you watch my previous videos, you know where I'm coming from. I don't have to keep reiterating these things. I will as needed as they come up, but I'm going to try to stop trying to pick apart and do this whole historical look back. So let's just keep moving. And when I see the need to do so, I will stop and just kind of pull things out. But anyway. So this is interesting. This is the left is doing this, the right's doing that. And then he's already phrased in terms of Hotep is for the blacks, alt-right is for the whites. But when you factor in the left-right political paradigm, particularly in America, you can see the screen as, so maybe I'll make it a little bigger just in case. Yeah, that looks good. So the left is a hypocritical bunch. They would complain about Trump's so-called Muslim ban, but on the other hand, they were quiet as a mouse when America was bombing and killing innocent people in the same Muslim countries. Yep, I'll give you that. The left. So that was the second point that I think I kind of stumbled upon. This is all just basic bitch conservatism, but it's predominantly black men wearing Trump hats that are championing this. I have to go lift it out, and I think maybe that would be like the kind of conclusion video. I'll go if I can find the Murdoch, because they got erased. Well, not erased, but people were re-uploading their stuff on YouTube. I have to go maybe find another channel. But this was, so the funny thing is, when we move over to the Hunter Wallace Occidental Dissent, which is basically a more southern geared white nationalist website that actually is going to run this article and comment on it. So the funny thing is, this whole left-right divide, one thing that struck me is that the left, when we think about the left, and maybe represented primarily by the Democratic Party in America, most of the Democratic Party, especially when we get the big shifts that happen, so the Republican Party, the Southern Strategy former Democratic South kind of shape shifts over to the Republican Party and what that eventually becomes from that point out to present day. And the Democratic Party kind of absorbs a lot of like, well, this is what the Trump election is kind of represented the kind of end point of all that like changes and all of the different things that they've absorbed since the 60s. They became the party of anti-war, at least in those earlier jaunts, definitely not now under the neoliberals. Black people, Hispanic people, gay people, basically everything that wasn't white, Christian, heterosexual, male particularly. And so this complaint about the left, because this is what you'll see in this Hotep article. You see it with some of these other guys. You even saw in the interview that I did the video on. Well, we're trying to point out where the left media is lying. And see, and I thought of today when I was thinking about doing this video. The left media, these Hoteps, these pro-black, base blacks, and Trump hats want to talk about is majority. I mean, not majority black, but a majority of black people who do tend to vote Democratic, vote left. And a lot of media outlets tend to have a whole smattering of black authors. So I get what you're trying to say about the left, but the left is basically, maybe not forever, and only because it's benefited both parties, maybe up until about recently, and it still does. But you can see, the kind of dissolution of what people have been calling, the coalition of the fringes. You can be all loving the muzzies, but the muzzies want to throw gays off the roof. The gays probably don't want to be in a party that's super welcoming to them. But then you have black people who feel a certain way about this, and then white liberal, kind of more middle class college types that tend to vote Democrat. It's a coalition of the fringes that isn't going to work that much longer. So I'll just leave that there. So Hotep want blacks to work towards having their own independent system where blacks do for blacks and don't ask for handouts. The white nationalists and alt-right are pretty much the same. Well, yeah, it's more like they want y'all to do this in the first sentence. Now let's pull that apart. Independent system, can we define that? Do you mean God forbid, another Black Wall Street? Is that what we're suggesting here? I really hope not. Or blacks do for blacks, don't ask for handouts. Well, when you look at the class disparities amongst black people, most black people in their own families don't do for each other. I don't even. It's such a vague statement that it's nobody could disagree with that. But it's not going to happen. It is just absolute folly. Where blacks do for blacks, don't ask for handouts. Handouts from whom? You mean from white Uncle Sam's sugar daddy? Yeah, I mean, that's something to be discussed. But I don't. Especially with blacks do for blacks. Let's just take one segment. So let's say we get rid of first we get rid of all these city municipal programs, particularly like BAM and My Brother's Keeper. That was more of a federal dictate target under Obama, but you do see those types of programs, particularly geared at black and Hispanic, mostly non-white, young male children in inner cities, where we're spending tax money to teach them how to not be violent or to stay in school, don't be a fool. Then we go over to something I guess you could say let's throw up the wicked and welfare, that with too many, a majority or a greater proportion of for instance, there's more white people on welfare because they make up a larger percentage of the population, but proportionally there's a greater proportion of black people who are receiving welfare bennies, and that's black men and black women. When you see the WIC, the welfare, the court system that stays gainfully employed, chasing down child support payments and chasing black men for this, that, and the third. I mean, there's a lot of things that we and large swath of black people suck up from the system. So let's say we get rid of those things, or pick one or two things. Let's get rid of all the after school programs, or just the programs that are basically in so many words targeted towards keeping black men off the streets and in school. And we stop spending that at the city and local level, either through private donation. Those private donations go to some other part of government or go to something else that's not geared towards them. And then if we're looking at that for black women and who are having children, let's just say WIC. We'll just throw it out there. I mean, not that they're the only people using WIC, not that there aren't Hispanic and a few white boys in certain systems falling into those programs. Let's just say we'll take those two. So what are the blacks going to do for other blacks? What amount of private businesses that are owned and operated by Black Americans that are going to step in and fill in the gap? Now, this is one thing that comes up here and there, and I haven't really delved into it. But I think John McWhorter touched on this. That there used to be, particularly from the end of slavery, even during slavery, a lot of the free Black people in the North and free Black people in the South, or wherever they may be, ran private charities and private groups to assist other Black people, be they free or slave, wherever they were. Where is the infrastructure that particularly someone like these Hoteps could be working to set up so that we get back to a position where Black people are privately helping each other and Blacks are doing for Blacks? So you can believe these things and say these things, because this is what we'll get into when the alt-right Southern nationalist Hunter Walls is taking a look at this. A lot of these things are Black men, and I'm going to say Black men. I haven't seen one Black woman come out as a Hotep. I know there's some chicks floating around Twitter on some of these niggas pages, but I don't see anything but just Black men trying to now wear Trump hats and say they get it too. But funnily enough, this is what I was hinting at before. Sorry, my chair's so squeaky. They know that Uncle Charlie, Mr. Charlie, and Mrs. Charlie done had it, and the Trump election kind of represents whites trying to slowly get their balls back and stop saying this and not an inch further. And I will give that to Mayhem, Uncle Mayhem, and Hotep Jesus, and these other niggas floating around this. They understanding that they better figure out they better figure out now that Black Lives Matter. And I've come with this before, I think, on some other videos. These are a few Blacks who are getting it and they're feeling the tide turn, and now they're trying to jump over to the other side and try to mitigate the fallout that's coming. And I give them credit for that, because it's clever. This little month or two that they were running around on Red Ice Radio having alt-righters talk about stuff like this, that was a great moment for a second. So I give them credit for that. This base Blacks and Trump hats all throughout the election. You saw that there's at least maybe 5, maybe a little less. There was Deplorable Melissa, and then Makata, Diamond and Silk. And then Katrina Pearson, who's obviously probably biracial, sometimes multiracial woman with some Black ancestry. But it's funny, they are out there. They've been out there for a minute, just being Trump voters with hats on. Are they maybe just 2 minutes ago were they just Democrats? Whole candidates on? Yeah, probably. But they got it, and they're out here too. But I only see people really trying to big up these Black men in Trump hats like it means something. Anyway, so Hoteps are sick of Blacks complaining about white supremacy. Blacks talk about how their melanin is so magical. That's true. Then surely no melanin recessive person should be able to stop you, right? Do you see how contradicting Blacks are now? Yeah, all right is tired of hearing Blacks cry about racial oppression, so naturally they would support the Hoteps that push back on this type of behavior. There's 5 of you, and this website is goofy as all hell. There's an article in here. I have to address this separately because it is just terrible. You're not pushing back against anything. Listen, I'm going to open this real quick. Look at their shot. Look at the shot. We're helping people. Now, this woke water is apparently for charity. I'm not going to click the link because I saw it. I was like, $125 for some woke water. And I was like, what? And then it says someplace else on the site, it's going towards some charity or whatever. And there's some hoodies. Hotep Nation, Crown, Think Good, Live Great. Third Eye Jedi. All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's just basically Blacks should do better, do other things. The blacks, but we're the good Blacks. We're the Hotep Blacks. We got Trump hats on and we love Trump. The conclusion. The far left is nothing but a bunch of crybabies that want Sam and Big Brother to handle all their problems, while Hoteps and alt-right want government involvement only where absolutely necessary. We want the freedom to build our own schools and educate our own kids. We want U.S. jobs, U.S. people. We want America to come first. Okay, that's great. You want U.S. jobs, U.S. people, America come first. So those last 2 points, this isn't anything special about Hoteps. It's not even anything special about a smattering of Black people besides the ones who get the megaphone. But we want the freedom to build your own schools and educate your own kids. There's nothing stopping you from that. I don't understand why that's even a statement here. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Most of you don't. Like that meme, that picture came up with Jay-Z and a bunch of guys at the Grammys, and it was basically about $7, $8, $10 billion of wealth amongst these black men standing here. Not one school or hospital show for it. So I don't really understand. Like this article you should be out there handing these out to LeBron and to Jay-Z and them. Nothing stops you from building your own schools, educating your own kids. Homeschooling, it's minus in some states, some places, is something really accessible to most people. I mean, this is just regurgitated boilerplate. Like the black conservatives have been saying this for years, and that was one big thing when I first read this. This is nothing different than what your basic black conservative, or just even that like a left right side, just like a normal black person that's not some like total like out there like liberal loony or whatever. This is standard boilerplate that most people think. Why is it something special that like requires like Hotep Nation to lead us? Anyway. A black that begs from whites upholds the system of white supremacy more than a white nationalist. So essentially, these types of blacks are white supremacists. Supremacy is a dual system, one above and one below. If you do not forfeit to being below, the other cannot be above or supreme. Okay, let me take a quick water sip right here. You know, I bet when I rather line with a racist white man than a crybaby black. Why? Because a black nationalist would agree that blacks have different blacks and stop complaining about what whitey does to them. Excuse me, getting a little bit of cold here. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna say that because that makes me think, because then that really calls into question the precursor to this. This article was published originally February 8th of 2017. So November. Okay, don't read anything. I'll come back because I want to come back to this. This is funny. So that was written in February 2017. There's an update to that article dated November 2017. Excuse me. All right. So let's move over to Occidental Dissent, where he comments about this article. This is a long-standing Southern nationalist website, that has been around for a bit. Some great articles here. I've been reading Occidental Dissent probably for some time. Probably came to it through from American Renaissance or another site like that. Highly recommended. Actually, as I'm looking through the recent posts, to make my way over here to see about this whole drama that's been going on. But anyway, so let's just jump to. Okay, well, here you go. So he basically read the article itself because he just links to this when he's commenting. Amazingly, there's nothing in this article that I disagree with. The Hoteps even call out Talcum X. Okay, first, great. Everybody calls out, what's his name? Sean King. That's his name, right? The guy that's basically white who tend to be black. Yeah, great. They call out Talcum X. Most people think he's goofy, but he serves if you're some Black Lives Matter-y, pro-blackity black, whatever person, whether you're like wearing dreads or you like work some middle class job for the city or private employment and you leave all this like race stuff. Yeah, most people, he just benefits them to a certain end. It's not that blacks just love these people. So yeah, they call it Talcum X. I mean, most people have been calling out Talcum X. Like, I don't really see why that's like some thumbs up or brownie points for these guys anyway. But so I propose sex succession, the end of forced integration, the creation of racially homogenous zones as the end game on this website. Within the racially homogenous zones, embryonic ethnostates would be created as each race rebuilt its identity and culture. So that's a full stop right here. Without just referring you back to my previous work, we know why black men and black people collectively are never going to do this. I've said it 1,000 times. We don't need to go back through it. That's just not going to happen. So you can get these hoteps and random black men, base black dindos and Trump hats to run around and tell you, we just hate the left and we really want our own stuff too. And we need to get off the welfare and we need our own businesses, economic empowerment. But they don't have any tangible plans. Like, it's so... We go back to that point, that updates, the article. It's really telling that, because like I said in the previous video, none of these people really know what the other's about. The problem with the alt-right, particularly, is evidenced this weekend, is there's too many white people who, especially who are younger in this scene, and the older ones haven't really laid out to be more truthful with them about the way the world is. and what they're actually capable of doing or what they want to do. And you have these ideas that since the media's been pushing the blacks down your throat and that they're really caring about the race, and you just feel like you're white and you have been playing this game for so long, it's really easy in the alt-right and these white identity movements to run articles praising the Hoteps, and then like this one, because all he really does is just talk about, I've always been a white nationalist, something, Malcolm X. What about black nationalism? That they just have these really basic, it's such an elementary understanding of black people, even when they're around them, that I'm still trying to breach this chasm to really explain this, because I don't really get why these articles run. I have two reasons. They know a lot better. Pause. Let me take a step. They just kind of seem to think that, I don't think these articles are written for other whites to really do anything. They're kind of written to see if you're no, they are. They're written for white people who are just kind of breaching their toe to identitarianism and to white nationalism, and just a kind of more race realist, right? And I think, especially you get like just a few eyes that come over from like more normie conservative, MLK is great, race doesn't mean anything, we're all one, America, blah, blah, blah. And they kind of write these articles for them to kind of have something to latch on to, kind of like a security blanket, while they kind of go further into some of these ideas. And by the time you've been here long enough, you read enough, and you get further in, you can kind of like let go of that blanket because you're there, and you accept and understand these differences between races, and you're there. But you need these kind of soft articles to just kind of go to guide you in. So I get that. But these embryonic ethnosex are going to happen because these black men don't want to go anywhere. Now, that other original video, god damn it, I really don't want to go too long on this one. Maybe I'll just pull it. Let's see if I can find it real quick in here. Hi, I am back. Hi.
That's what the alt-right is. The alt-right, you get your Gavin McInnes, Milo Yiannopoulos, these people that we must prove the existence of Western children.
How long it took them to get to this?
Right, like civic nationalism.
Yeah. Exactly. Give me a second to jump around and find it.
You do need to think about other people, not in the sense that I need to take care of them, is that I am going to advocate for my race. Having, like, if I didn't know you guys, and just me.
That sit here, we marching and Black Lives Mattering,
to advocate for white interests. But obviously, I'd be happy if
then they can just answer and say yes in the affirmative. Don't speak up, and these are more alt-right, distant right inclined.
If we could go back to
I'm still here. I'm really going to find
schools, segregation, and right to associate and right to disassociate, which is like, this is my restaurant. I'm sorry, black guy, you don't get to sit at the counter.
Don't speak up. And this, in a sense, like I'd have a much better conversation with these kids. We wouldn't giggle so much and maybe have as much fun, but they would probably get a lot more from someone like me as a black woman, primarily because it's a conversation that is never had. God damn it! It's hard going back and finding through my own stuff because I know I have the timestamp someplace. Anyway, so if you remember, I can pimp my other video here. We'll just do that. So if you remember this video, the big point there's a point that they're talking. Let's open back up, and he basically says, "Oh, well, I just don't want you like in my neighborhood to mix in with my women." And the Hotep Jesus, who wrote this original article we're talking about now, and Flex, whatever his name is, they just sit there like, okay. And even in that video, they clearly state, well, we're not really looking for racial separatism, and we don't want that. But all he really got to was like, we just want to like call the liberals and blacks should like stop complaining. I mean, that might have been where some of these folks may have been years ago. But this is what he said. They want racially homogenous zone and their own racial ethno states. You don't want that. But then what are we even talking to these black men for anyway? That should be the precursor. Like, I'll be the first to tell you, well, no, actually, it's interesting. Man, excuse me, let me pause one more time for another sip. Darn cold I'm for, and that's why I fundamentally agree with the majority of white nationalists, white separatists. But as a black woman, in all the videos I've done here, and all the women that I pointed you towards in these scenes, Kendall, Miss Archduchess, Simone, CK, we know that's not going to happen. So I can be for something, but can fundamentally understand why it's never going to happen. But I can agree with this and actually say, okay, this is what you guys should be doing. I know my race, and I know the man in my race is never going to do this stuff. But we have to move forward, not to move through with what is and what is. So these embryonic episodes are going to happen. These black men don't want to go anywhere. As the two Hoteps in that video told you, well, we just want to call it the liberals. And even then, Hotep Jesus himself is claiming he doesn't really understand what the difference between alt-right and alt-light is, as he's doing this whole thing. So we're here. What is the definition of Hotep? It's just so ancient Kemet, Egypt. Hotep has several meanings. It basically means peace. So this is just what some John Lennon type of well, imagine all the people, Hotep, la 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 la. To me, it means self accountability. I'm not gonna pull up the tweet. We went through a couple different definitions, they kind of translated from Egyptian hieroglyphs. It kind of means to sit, to be encapsulated. The way a lot of those older language structures, like a word. A lot of our earlier, maybe I would say the Egyptians, maybe even Latin to a certain degree has that kind of characteristic where a lot of words that we have now today in the English language, millions and millions of words, kind of originate from a lot of our earlier Latin, Greek, and even loosely pulling up something like ancient Egypt. In Egyptian text, those translations, one word or kind of encapsulates a lot of different aspects of meaning. So it means self-accountability, not being a victim. You're just pouring your impression onto this word. It's some Egyptian word that means peace, and it was been around forever, literally forever. It's just another word for another black woke movement for black people to latch onto. They've been doing this for years. So it's Kendall St. Charles talks about this a lot, having been a teenager, 20-something in the late 80s, early 90s. This is just to say repackaged goofiness they keep trying to pull. The only difference now with this Hotep in this incarnation, when it had a little bit of steam, was that it was something the Trump election kind of gave these people a little bit more kind of way to kind of use this to get somewhere. But it doesn't really go anywhere because you can put a Trump hat on now, but then if anybody picks apart most of this is the same things that they were talking about forever. Go back to the 80s and 90s. Think about diggable planets and some of those other early 90s kind of rap groups that were a lot more conscious and just about love and peace, and they were rapping and kind of hip hopping, but they lost a lot of traction due to the gangster rap and thug culture and hip hop culture that majority of black people, particularly black men, had no problem with. There's been C. Dolores Tucker, who I mentioned a couple times, who might even warrant a video onto herself, push back a lot against what she foresaw coming with rap and hip hop and letting it, permeate into the culture. But a lot of the pushback was this is these young black men telling their story and saying what they want to say and telling their truth, and you're just trying to censor them or shut them down. So now we have these same black people like Hoteps and what have you complaining about the culture now, but there's been so many alarms pulled about black people doing for themselves. I'm not as familiar with him as I'd like to be, but I've heard Kendall St. Charles and a few other folks mention this Dr. Claude Anderson. He's, it's funny, I hear him kind of more black-centric circles, but I think maybe an equivalent you could draw is maybe Thomas Sowell to maybe more, I would say there's black people who reference him. He's referenced more on the conservative side. There's been black men, both black men, by the way, who had a lot of knowledge to offer and opinions to offer about where the race has started to go wrong. Majority of black people just simply don't care. And I wouldn't mind either Mayhem or Jesus or whoever else would just do their thing and have fun trying to work with their own black people, but trying to be these voices for say we're going to be Hoteps and it means peace and some accountability, but we're voting for Trump and we're challenging the liberals and the left. It's just hokey, warmed over 90s, 80s conscious black goofiness, but just wrapped up in a Trump hat now in this incarnation, because now the game is changing. And I think as you see the things that we talk about as black women over here in these circles starts to bubble up to the surface, a lot more black men, particularly in these scenes, are like getting, and then you're seeing whites really show up and show out for Trump. They're starting to realize, oh, wait a second. You've been talking all this stuff about freedom and doing your own economic accountability, but nothing has transpired. So yeah, in 2016, 2017, you better like find new hustle. And again, as the New York Times, the Ross Chetty, Bookings.com piece pointed out, people are starting to realize that there's a common denominator as to why this race isn't going anywhere. It's not black women. Because the thing is, the black women, you'll fix her real fast, you fix this black man. But we'll leave that conversation someplace else for now. Maybe my voice is getting really dry. I apologize. My coffee waffy sniffle video. It's like I'm not even feeling that cold right now, but like my throat's drying out a lot quicker than normal. So Hunter Wallace says, everything in this article is absolutely true. More than anything else, the collapse of the black family, the demise of the black economy and neighborhood, and the exception with politics over morality and economics is responsible for the present-day condition of black people. The talented and succeeded from black America moved to the white man's neighborhood. Okay, hey, that paragraph says a lot. So, more the collapse of black family, demise of black economy, neighborhood. Now, one thing I'll note right there that I've really been thinking about, and I noticed this when I was watching Lackawanna Blues. It's like a movie from the 90s. I can't remember. Harper Hill is in it, and he's kind of it's like he has his grandmother who's like about to die, and he's kind of reflecting being a kid and growing up with her, now with his mom, a lot of family stuff going on. But anyway, one of the big things is this is maybe like the late 40s, early 50s, when wherever they were living was still kind of very white, segregated, black segregated, Jim Crow, kind of sundown, that whole era. And the reason, and it's funny because at the end there's a flashback scene where he's standing there, he's an older man, and they do the camera thing where like you see all the boarded up buildings and the like kind of like riffraff, like your inner chocolate cities, the way they look now, it reflects back to when he was a kid. It was all like, normal buildings, jobs, and, little bars, little restaurants and stuff. Now, one thing that they keep, this is what the Hoteps and a lot of the black people now, still these black men, particularly in all their like 60s welfare, wicked feminism article, forget is that the one of the big reasons why black economies thrive up until integration was because black people didn't have nowhere else to go. You see it today, so like it's funny. There's the not tipping and not being the most financially collective people as a race that black people suffer from. That's one of the reasons you don't have black restaurants or cafes. Like even like you go to like the most hard scrabble, like I mean, most of us in certain cities, you have all these little Asian areas where they're just like working class, maybe slightly down, really mobile, but they always have like their own little restaurant or two. You can always go sit, it's not the fanciest place, but you can eat their ethnic food. Every other group seems to have that. You have like some still standing kind of like 1950s, 60s style, mostly kind of maybe white Polish, white Irish, whatever types of restaurants where you can still go have a Polish, have some meatloaf. Everybody has that but us because we have such a weird thing about money, about tipping, about gratuity, about service, the give and take amongst us as black people. But so factoring that in on top of it, the reason why there was more of a black economy is to a certain degree because we had to support our own businesses. We weren't allowed in certain places, and this is where some people may say, "Okay, you're saying this." This is why I'd argue that maybe sundown towns and some type of resegregation to a certain degree might be the trick. Okay, sorry about that pause there. I'm like having like the worst like cold symptoms again. So I really apologize for this video. I really didn't mean for this to happen. I'm just really like I haven't talked this much, in a while. So anyway, I'm gonna soldier through this. So please forgive me. Yeah. So obsession with politics over morality and economics. Yeah. Well, there you go. So it became more, and I think there's one thing I've touched on. I think for a lot of poor blacks, particularly like the tail of the Great Migration, I can even, and I said I can locate my own family, my own maternal side of the family to this side. You know, we forget that a lot of this is, well, unfortunately, it's a lot of poor black people descended from sharecroppers who just started coming north. I mean, they had a high school education. They probably would have stayed and worked some basic job in the South, but they end up on buses and cars coming up to the north. And some of them are basically just high school educated. And then their kids are kind of born in the South, maybe somewhere in like the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. They end up in the North, maybe in the 60s, 70s, going to the 80s. And I, I mean, I can't really explain this. I'm not going to try to like get too stumped on this, but they're just not, they're here. And I imagine just being, I try to just think about what it must have been like. You know, the politics has changed. There's all this change in the air. And if you're someone that's just like descended from some random Negroes sharecropping in the South, you never been nowhere, you never really seen anything. It was just really easy for black people to come up in so many numbers to become these monoliths. And of course, this was all at the wrong time. I can't. This is a whole other thing. I really want. I've already tangented enough of my like cold and everything here. Basically, yeah, the obsession with politics because it was a great society. The Democratic Party will have these niggers voting for like Democrat for the next 200 years. So all these things just line up perfectly in this decade. And and then what do you do? So then the economic front, again, like you have a lot of like black people just who don't really know anything, especially in that era. So like you have the free blacks and some of the smart good blacks, whatever. Then you have the segment of black people who were, you know, like the power of Black Panther movements. You have a lot of like fragmentation in that era. And then I was thinking about this too recently because I'm trying to work on another video. One of the big problems is that I'd argue that happened was a lot of the black people who had all these revolutionary changes and ideas aren't that really connected to. There was just too many moving pieces at the time. You still have the black people just coming north. They just find themselves as black people in the north, uh, living in your St. Louis's, your Baltimore's, Chicago's, your Gary's, your Milwaukee's, your, you know, just insert those cities, and they just don't really know any better. And then if you think of the Black Panther movement, particularly being, you know, situated more in major cities, you know, you think of like, you know, Southern California in particular, and New York. So those are already kind of coastal places. I just think there's too much. It's like there's too much and too little attributed to like blacks as a whole working in this kind of hive mind versus in the late 50s into like the early 70s when a lot of this change was moving and happening. There's too many people independently making choices that would like have effects much later on down the road. Anyway, so that last point, the talented 10th moved to the white man's neighborhood. Well, yeah, you know, interestingly enough, it's funny he says that because he's kind of representing low when he's like kind of very basic white alt-right nationalist talking points where like not every like black person that's a suburbanite moved to a white man's neighborhood away from everything. But there's a chunk who have. But what's more telling is that you get the first wave of the white flight out. And so a lot of the more black middle class neighborhoods aren't really all out in the far flung nice white man suburbs, quote unquote. They're kind of, it's almost like you see these waves happen. So a lot more of those areas now are kind of like where black people just moved into that first or second ring where whites left. So they're kind of like maybe more situated in these outer ring suburbs. You know, and I've seen this in the city that I grew up in. You still have a fair amount of whites who still live if they're city workers and they can't move, or they still need to have some proximity to like the city center, which, you know, is where, you know, not necessarily where all there's always like the prominent black part of town where they live. But anyway, it's, yeah, they move, but like this again. So, well, it's funny. We talk about this New York Times article. So are we arguing now? So now reading this again, I read this a year ago. I was like, I said what I just said. Like, it's not they all moved, and what does that difference that mean? So just living next to like a black person. Because they can think about, do I want to get my car broken into? Do I want like some weird Negro sneering in my face? Oh, you got one of them good white man jobs. Like that. Then do I play another video running his mouth about that women in your degrees? That's too bad because I go date a hood rat who got some sense. Like, do you really want to be around black people and their antagonism and they're just like absolute weirdness half the time? No. And it's not even about it's moving to like the white man's neighborhood, it's just moving away from them, wherever the away from them could be. But so yeah, they succeeded, and again, like it's not our responsibility. And I guess I don't know how. I guess I'm calling myself the talented 10th there. I guess I could, some of the parameters of that. Again, that's W.B. Du Bois from like 100 something, almost 150 years ago. I kind of wish black and white nationalists, alt-righters, Hoteps, or whatever the hell these people are would leave some of these things behind. Because we're still talking about Malcolm X and W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. Like, we haven't gone through the postmodern era. We haven't gone into the 21st century where even looking back to some of those things still make sense, but they just don't. They don't account for a lot of the social, technological, cultural, insert XYZ changes that have occurred even within the past 30 years. But so the Talented Tenth, again, I was gonna say, as I was reading that piece, think about that. So we just had Raj Chetty and the New York Times, but then we had the Brookings Institute article come around and kind of circle back and say, well, no, it doesn't. Well, it's funny. It said it mattered that black men who were fathers lived in proximity or in the same census tract as the majority of these poor black boys. But so when I was reading this a year ago, okay, the town's 10th move, what does it matter? But allegedly, but then that article never, that study never specified that. If a black man is like, oh, remember ODB, Old Dirty Bastard, that rapper with like 20,000 kids. So if he just lives like, we could DNA replicate him and make clones and place him into like every Baltimore, Philly, Gary, Milwaukee, Chicago. Does that mean all those kids will be better because a father lives in their given census tract to uplift them from poverty? Or will we more accurately say, like, someone like, oh, yeah, because someone was just talking about him. Kristen just talked about Ralph Richard Banks, who's a black man, or Lennon Honor. Lennon Honor is a black man married, I believe. God, I hope so. Because I remember somebody said, "Oh, they're not legally married. They can be common law with." Anyway, a black man with 5 children with a black woman, makes a decent living online. Puts out great material. He's not a complete fuckface like a lot of these black men online. So if we could DNA, duplicate, replicate, clone him and spread him around. So what would the difference be between him and Old Dirty Bastard? But again, I want to talk about that because what does it mean? Like, it's just like the Schrodinger's cat. They need black fathers around so they don't shoot each other, but then they're not needed economically because it didn't matter economically anyway. I've been kind of rolling that around my head, thinking about revisiting that yet again. Maybe with the Brookings Institute article, because I never really covered that one at length. So I'll save that. So, when the talented 10th actually had to live in black neighborhoods and was dependent on its own community for its income, it clamped down on black dysfunction. Well, it clamped down and kept it out of white society because everybody would get their ass towed up by the white man. So no, you kind of see again. This is where Hunter and a lot of alt-writers are just kind of like. I think the biggest problem explaining these things to them is that they don't understand that, like, yes, there were Sunday laws of Jim Crow, but a lot of that same black dysfunction, the illegitimacy, drinking, drugging, acting a fool, a lot of that just was never, white people never had to ever see it or deal with it. And so then we think about whites who are alive today now, well into the early 2000s, it's really hard for them to fathom when they keep reading white nationalists and white authors republish the same talking point. There's less and less white people who were alive during those times who understood, who could maybe tell you what it was like. They probably heard some of the stories and things come out, but they didn't clamp down. They clamped down on it enough to keep it within the black race and the black community, the black neighborhood, because everybody would be getting clacked up by the white man had those things gotten out. There was plenty of dysfunction, illegitimacy. So the talented 10th blacks, Kendall said it once, dysfunctional with degrees. Because that's what a lot of black people who, just because they don't have sagging pants or 8 babies on their hips, does not mean that a black person is like a good black. I really resent that. And I think this is one of my big beefs with the alt-right and a lot of white nationalists is that, particularly as they move from the 1.0, 2.0, in terms of like accessibility, they've really not really gotten over some of these talking points that they don't really seem to understand that aren't true. So fatherlessness has nothing to do with slavery or segregation. Yeah, when blacks were emancipated from slavery, they eagerly formed their own families and churches. The decline of the family reason phenomenon became a serious problem in the white community as well due to its cultural changes. Yeah, there's a lot more to be said there that I'm just not going to go into because it's just a little much and this is already running longer in the tooth that I would have liked. But it doesn't, well, See, even during slavery and in segregation, again, you have black people having illegitimate children forever. Like, I thought about this on the plantation. It wasn't like there was like a plantation and then there's all these like little, little like 2-room homes where every black nuclear family on the plantation lived amongst themselves. There weren't slave cabins. They just all had their little nuclear families, and they jumped the broom, had their marriage license. They were married. He was only with one black woman. I mean, we are leaving so much out there to be said that it's like we're so far from like a lot of these original points that it gets harder to try to reach back and try to like kind of correct for like a lot of these misgivings that I keep seeing reprinted everywhere. So yeah, they found out their own families and churches. Yeah, but they're still illegitimate in church. So it's the same whites will be in these scenes of like, oh, well, affirmative action degree is just a degree piece of paper. Well, going to church and saying you love Jesus. I mean, people can go to church and say love Jesus all day, just to like get a piece of bread or like not you know think about early more early mid European history of like Christendom taking over Europe. Plenty of people said they knew Jesus, but they still like maybe had some offshoots of worshiping Odin or as much as they could, or still practicing more pagan witchcraft. I don't know. I mean, it's another throwaway statement. Like, okay, the decline of family recent phenomenon. Yeah, and I posted this in another video. The promises I can keep interview, and then that 1986 Bill Moyer CBS special. It is a more recent phenomenon. It just one key thing. I'll just leave it here. It became easier for black women to reproduce and to just keep trying to hold the black family together. You can't get married because you don't really have any reason to get married. You have no wealth to share. Marriage is a social contract, and it was more important to have a brother in the home and to like have someone to love, which unfortunately people do with children all the time, and to keep that going. So the decline of the family, well, it should decline the husband wife and 2.5 children. That's never really been some continuous staple of even sub-Saharan black life in existence. I don't even know why people keep repeating this. Like we've been in the U.S. for 500 years. This is not even a part of any type of like black sub-Saharan black family traditions. I mean, been very matrilineal and even polygamous to a very large degree. We've just been in the West for 500 years, and a lot of those practices do dissipate, but they aren't going to have been completely erased. But again, that's more for another time. So this is pretty much just that. Let's just really leave here with this. So we read the original Hotep Nation article. We talked about that, and then we read a little bit of Hunter Wallace's Dissent, try to kind of evaluate it and take a look. So February 27, 2017. This original one went live on February 8th, 2017, just a week later. But looky here, update, November 15th, 2017. I regret to inform you that I believe that the alt-right has been compromised. It is now under the deep control of the deep state of whomever is also controlling Black Lives Matter. You know what? Pause. Let's see something. I'm very curious. Streamed 1 year ago. When did this go live? Streamed live on March 18th, 2017. So he did this interview with them. I did Europa. Update, November 15th, 2017. So it's about 7 months later. Okay. He reposted it anyway. So these two organizations are two sides of the same coin designed to create fiction between the black and white races amongst a slew of other motives. Well, let's just read it first. It is now controlled opposition no longer for the people, white people. Richard Spencer has been thrust to the top of a pseudo leader of a once promising movement with much help from the corrupted mainstream media. Originally, alt-right was alternative for the right wing. It did not have the racist undertones that the media purports and reports today. I'll assume that alt-right was compromised right around the time Hillary Clinton mentioned in the mainstream media. Hillary, with the help of the media, propelled this movement to mainstream consciousness and then derailed and distorted its meaning and purpose by altering the narrative. Hotep Nation does not and never had an official alliance with the alt-right. I personally never had a conversation with Richard Spencer and probably will never have a talk with him. This piece is written at a time when people were questioning why Hotep Nation still does not have a problem with white nationalists. Everything I wrote in this, I still stand by today and won't be changing anytime soon. Alt-right, as is used in this blog post, refers to white nationalists. This is a community I have no gripes with. Watch this interview for clarification on the matter, which is recorded shortly after writing this. Okay. Well, that's all Friday Dandy. And I guess arguably after this past weekend with the whole Ricky Vaughn, Paul Nealon thing, I guess you could kind of suggest, there's enough discussion happening. I won't speculate. There are some problems with the term. There's problems with the brand, and specifically with Richard Spencer. I just don't know what to say anymore. And I kind of it's a whole subject unto itself. So I don't really have as much of a problem with him saying this, but this is the funniest part. So, where did he go? Where did he say that? It did not have the racist undertones that the media reports today. Are you insane? This because in the video I just did previously on the stream he did with some of the people in Identity Europa, these racist undertones. Well, the white nationalism, just the way we know it, particularly in America, like there's a lot of racial undertones in terms of race realism. Like a lot of it maybe will come from we're talking about race, IQ, racial differences, and then there's some off-color jokes here and there. You even see like some of it directed towards the Irish and Italians, whatever. I mean, right? There weren't no racist undertones in media reports today. It didn't have those things. Are you serious? I've been familiar with the alt-right probably since about the second term of Obama's presidency, maybe a little before that. I was kind of on my kind of normie conservative Tea Party days, until I kind of like a more it was kind of like the Ron Paul libertarian scene kind of like got me to a certain place, and then kind of coming in within like kind of a bracket around that time was like a lot of the normie Tea Party time in my life. Like it's like, what are you talking about? There are no racial undertones in media reporting today. Are you insane? Because again, it was so funny reading this today when I came to pull the article up. This is exactly what I was getting at in the previous video in part 1 of this alt-right Hotep Folly. There's always like we don't know what they're doing. Any of these people can be researched. You can spend an hour just like I almost want to just do it right now real quick. Let's say I was interested in. I'm not gonna do it. Let's see. He still has. Oh, he doesn't still have like links. Maybe the homepage there's still links. Like most of them link back to each other across the scene. So if you're on somebody's you just have like a link all throughout the side of his not just his activism. Well, he used to have like a whole stream of links right here that you can look at. So it's really not that hard to like take a look around and get an idea of what like a summation of a movement, especially the internet today. But I'm noticing it's something like, well, again, I'm not holding Hotep Jesus at fault for this, because it's literally the same thing that happened with the alt-right. Oh, these black nationalists, they just that solution to the black family. It's just because of this. Like a lot of these people are walking around these most basic talking points that don't really mean anything or go anywhere. But anyway, and I pulled this one up. I didn't really have it. I guess maybe we'll just pull one note from here that I just read, and then we'll just wrap this up here. What we really need are more Earl Littles, which is Malcolm X's given name. We need more Earl Littles to preach ethnic pride amongst the people in the midst of an obviously cruel identity crisis brought about by some sort of collective Stockholm syndrome or the otherwise basic soulless materialism of their more entrepreneurial and ruthless leadership. And can we all relate to that? I'm not holding my breath. We can't babysit black community forever. They need to take their destiny back into their own hands, just the same as we do. Fair enough. Totally give you that. The black people were collectively never going to do anything remotely looking like that. But it's good to kind of see, people starting to pull away from these things, and especially Malcolm X. Like, I mean, people talk Malcolm X all the time. Sometimes they miss certain points, or they're just kind of referencing him like, it's like we think of like colas, you think of Pepsi and Coke. You're not really thinking about the history of them or distinct differences. It's like him and MLK are just like these kind of grab bag figures for people to talk about. So people talk about Malcolm X or Earl Little quite a bit, but again, at the end of this is there's no alliance going to happen. And I mean, even just looking at this past weekend, all right, and just how the problems that they have on their side of the table, yeah, that deserves a whole talk onto itself. I'm gonna wrap this up here. I've kind of made you suffer through my like cold and my like goofy, really dry throat and everything tonight. So I'm going to just stop here. You should look at the links below, see if there's anything you can gather from either of these two. I think I'll cut back through the article here. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. There's an article in Hotep Nation that is, it's deplorable to say the least. So I might have to go ham on that one. And I want to see some more information, some more conversation come out, and perhaps we could talk about this whole kind of dust up the Ricky Bond docs, the whole Weave, Hunter Wallace, Christopher Cantwell issue that's going on there. Maybe I'll just do a live on that sometime this week as more information comes to the forefront. So thank you for listening to this through my like cold and my crabbiness. And I'll be back with another video, and I'll talk to you later.